presents Inside Gene Shepard.
Test. Hey, attorney, what's the matter? No gain. Hello, 1, 2. There, we're back in business. Almost. Not quite. Always check it before you walk out of here. Make sure the gain's right, okay? That's like a mechanic not trying out the aircraft engine after he works on it. You're liable to wind yourself up in the weeds, right? Yeah. I'd like to, I don't know whether I should bring this up or not. It's quite controversial, but I have a friend who's been working on a ship model, which he got for Christmas in 1956, and he's been working on it ever since, and it's beginning to get him really mad. In fact, well, now wait a minute, now don't put it down. He says he can't do anything about it. He said because this ship model was given to him by a relative, and every time they come over, they check on it to make sure he's got it and he's working on it. And he says it's like working on the damn pyramids. He's getting tired of it, and he doesn't like ships. Well, you can get yourself involved in some very bad scenes like that. For example, I have a friend who, when he was 19 years old, he was really into music. And so he spent all of his money on records. And he wound up with like 25,000 records. Now he can't stand music, but he doesn't know what to do with the records. So, I mean, that's the way with life. Well, of course, the late James Thurber always had trouble with ex-wives. He collected, he had a few. In fact, you remember his famous cartoon? Yeah, it was a great cartoon. It shows this house, just a Thurber interior there. And it had a bookcase, and there were some people coming in to visit the denizens of the house. The man and the woman were standing there greeting their friends at the door, and they were standing in the living room. And he says, that's the first Mrs. Culpepper. Up there on top of the bookcase. She was crouched up there looking down. Would you please... before we get started here, I'd like to salute a new emerging art form, which is... all emerging art forms are new, of course, essentially, but this is a new emerging art form, which the ABC television network is bringing... I can't say it's full flower. Let's say it's full weed. And that is the non-sport sport. Has become big on sport shows. Sport shows at ABC these days seem to consist of endless interviews of Howard Cosell with Muhammad Ali. It's called a sport show. But also they have another emerging category, though. Not only the Howard Cosell non-interview, but the which I think is more interesting, is the emergence of the sporting event, which has no sporting characteristics. Like, for example, who can jump off the highest pole? You saw that one, so, oh, you didn't? Well, you should watch some of these things. So you would know what I'm talking about if once in a while you got your head out of the hood and started to watch something. But, for 45 minutes we keep leaving the basketball game to see whether or not these guys are jumping off this pole. And always there's a voice saying in hushed tones, and in just a few moments, the 7,942-foot leap will be once again in the record books of fantastic. The wind is blowing. And it's the most cockamamie event I've ever seen since Schwartz and Flick and I instituted a sporting event, which got very, very popular for a while at the Morton Junior High School, which is long-distance spitting against the wind. Really good. Some guys can do it. The secret, for those of you who want to go into long-distance spitting, the secret, of course, is to be able to spit a very small, compact pellet of saliva. See, not the more, let's say, the more copious you are, the less chance you have of doing it. You wind up, with the stuff blowing back in your face, and it's a sickening. Bystanders getting splattered, and there's no control. But you agree, Jim, that you've seen people who can make that little zap, like a little BB. It goes whistling out. The best accurate long-distance spitter I ever saw was a guy who played for the Mets. And I used to watch him come up with great interest whenever he would bat. I would crouch up either very close to the TV set, or if I was at the ballpark, I would crank up the binoculars to watch him perform, because he was really great. He would stand in the batting circle and flip the bat up a couple of times and bang it down. He had this donut on the end, take a couple of cuts. And he was a pretty good hitter anyway, and I'd take a couple of cuts and he'd move. And then as soon as he would get into the batter's box, he would walk up to the batter's box, he would kick the dirt a little bit, and then back out. He always had a tendency to step into the box, take a couple of movements of the hip, and then back out. He backed out of the box, reached down, take some clay, and rub it on his hands. And at that point, his head would go up. Just at that point, I would say, watch this, friends, watch, it's great. At that point, he would go, that little shot. Fantastic. Halfway to first base. He used to lay it right down the line. Zap, like that. Say, zap. And who was that? He was an outfielder. I'll give you a clue. So let's give, please, give me that. That's right. A little salute here to great, unappreciated moments in American sport. Raise.
Good evening, sport fans, wherever you might be tonight. This is Stan Lomax and tonight's View of Sports. Tonight we salute a new sport and a new American champion. Tonight's sports hero is brought to you by Rolo Cigars. Tonight we salute an American sports hero. And this hero, incidentally, is also a pioneer. The self-proclaimed world champion strawberry catcher is Ken Samples of Salem, Oregon. Mr. Samples, in magnificent form and beautifully controlled performances, catches strawberries and small cherry tomatoes in his mouth after they have been launched 200 to 300 feet or more by a specially built giant slingshot. Recently, at a well-attended performance in Oceanside, California, he set the world's record diving catch of a strawberry at 310 feet, 10 inches. A magnificent performance by an American champion, and we salute you. Tonight's sports hero is brought to you by Ropo Cigars, the cigar that makes you think. One puff on an El Ropo and you know that you've met your match. Listen to the Blue Network tomorrow for Stan Lomax and the Sports Hero of the Week.
Thank you. That was very good. You like it, huh? No, I mean, now, just think about it this for a minute. Now, here's a guy that catches strawberries, launched from a specially made giant strawberry, obviously, a strawberry launcher in the form of a slingshot. Now, that in itself is pretty interesting. I don't know whether you've ever tried to shoot the strawberries out of a slingshot. I'd like to see that done. But now that's a perfect subject for the wide world of sports on ABC. Go and pick that one up. Like, for example, they have a cow flop throwing contest in Oklahoma every year. Who can throw a cow flop the furthest? And of course, accuracy is part of it, too. They have a big circle. You got to drop it right in there. It's like parachute jumping. And they say, though, that can be very exciting to watch. And especially if you get close right down there and, to get the box seats, you'll have to wind up with a cow flop in a year. But, well, that's the way with all sports. You'll have to wind up with a foul ball in your ear if you go to Shea. So, you got to take it. There's a little danger in being a spectator. But this is a sport that I'd like to see. And tonight, I think I'm going to, since it's spring, and spring is a time of unease. It is. It's on the one hand, it's a time of exaltation, which incidentally produces unease in many people. Do you agree? Oh yes. At any time of great change, and the seasonal change is a great change, because we're part of the animal kingdom. But we're actually affected by all these things. The spring comes, the winter comes, the rains come, the fall comes, the barometer changes. Do you know that a book has recently been published by a major world geologist, meteorologist, where he predicts, and this is give you something else to worry about once in a while outside of all the usual. Are you getting a little bit bored by the news again? I can't. It's so boring. I watched 3 newscasts the other night just to see, with a watch there to see what happened. And out of 3 half-hour television newscasts, each one of them devoted anywhere from 20 to 26 minutes on Vietnam. Nothing else happening in the world. Oh wow. Well, I guess it's the way it is. That's called the herd instinct. If one newscast came on, never mentioned it at all, except down at the end, he'd be so far out of the herd that he'd liable to big problems. So the herd instinct is also electronic as well as philosophical and physical. You've got to get in with the herd, and if you're not in with the herd, you're very suspicious. Not only to yourself, you suspect yourself, being sick. And on the one hand, you can disdain the herd. On the other hand, you want to get invited. So it's a real problem. But I was just thinking about this spring thing. See, the sun comes out, and the breezes blow, and the robins walk around, and doing what robins do, and all that stuff. Possums are walking around now, and guys are out there with their Sears Roebuck fishing equipment, flailing away at the woods and the trees and the birds, everything except the stream. I saw one guy trying to climb a tree the other day in Jersey. It was fantastic. He had a Royal Coachman fly. How he got it up that high, I don't know. It was about 300 feet up in a tree. And there he was with his fly rod hanging, dangling. He was up there trying to get it. So the sport that we deal with here is not always necessarily a straight-line sport. If you watch television, you'd think everybody's playing tennis. That's it. They're all playing tennis now. But there's a lot of guys that are out there doing the mumbly peg bit. And yes, do you ever see a good mumbly peg player? You know what the game is, don't you? With the knife. Flick it like that. It's quite a great sport if you learn how to do it. You can lose a thumb, but that's one of the things that makes a sport interesting, is to have a little danger to it. Now, one of the big sports that grew suddenly in the Morton Junior High School, just like the sports. You see, I think sports grow out of the ground like weeds, and they have a brief moment of flurry, interest, and then they disappear. Man is the only creature that we know of that invents abstract games by which he measures himself against other creatures. Now, other animals play, we think, play. They just play. They'll swim and they'll do all kinds of things. But to invent an abstract thing that has nothing whatsoever to do with basic human function or basic animal function is really interesting. It's an animal thing, the idea of a game. Like, for example, I heard on one of the educational type FM stations, they were driving along, a guy was denouncing for a full half hour. You always got the one thing about FM, there's always somebody denouncing something on it. That's just great. I mean, that's the denunciatory form of electronic communication is the FM, see. But I'm right, and this guy's spending a whole half hour denouncing the game of Monopoly. Well, he says, this day of democracy, and he went on and on and on. See, obviously missing the point, though, which is basic to it, and that is that man has a basic desire to monopolize. It has nothing to do with what's good or bad. He has a basic desire. And, for example, have you noticed in all the various so-called workers' paradises, there's always a great big battle as to who's going to be the leader? Usually it winds up with gunfire, with guys up against walls, and other guys dangling from scaffolds, other guys being put into salt mines. And the desire to monopolize is far greater than the desire to, let's put it this way, democratize. And so games are a natural offshoot of this. I mean, to beat somebody. So the solitary games that you play against yourself are always dull. Not dull, but they don't get the great crowds involved. Like tennis is exciting because you can beat somebody. You can actually beat him. You just wham, you overhand smash and the guy topples backward, with his eye bulging out, and there's a certain amount of satisfaction in that. In fact, did you read Chris Evert's, or if you prefer Everts? See, that's the mispronunciation. It's actually Everts. Chris Evert's line about Billie Jean King. When she beat her the other day, she says, when you look across the net at Billie Jean King, she looks at you with total hate. That has nothing to do with the niceties of the game. Did you read her comment? Well, she did say that. So she says, I have to really play my game when I'm playing. You see, hatred is part of the competitive spirit. And even though, we make a great pretense of showmanship and gamesmanship and sportsmanship and all the rest of it, ultimately, to grind the other guy underfoot is what the game is about. Have you ever wondered why big businesses seem to always want to become bigger? Even though, they're making all kinds of money and everything's going great. And the executives, each one on his own, each executive above the rank of assistant vice president owns his own Caribbean island. And the airplanes, they all own a whole bit. Have you ever wondered why they're urged to continually become bigger and bigger and bigger? Well, it's the old urge to grind the other one underfoot. Grind him underfoot. You see this in politics. You see, have you ever wondered why? Now here you got Cambodia falling. You have Thailand falling. Well, it's the urge of the communists in this case to grind all other philosophies underfoot. And it's a genuine urge. And on the other hand, we have the same thing. We want to grind the other philosophies. We want them to play our game. And so this is what makes man man. If you took away the competitive thing that's in all of us, and by the way, the guys that are the most competitive are the guys that sit on all-night talk shows, or they sit on the Tom Snyder show, and they talk about how evil competition is, and you see the glint coming out of their eyes of how they've just taken charge of this new organization that's going to stamp out evil. And we're going to devote our, of course, they're going to compete against the competition people, and their philosophy is now going to prevail. And so all the way down the line, you find competition and the clash of humanity is an indigenous part of us, just like, and I have to say it, it's just like the salmon swimming upstream. He can't do anything about it. I imagine there are some salmon who stand in the forerun of the salmon push that's going upstream, we'll say. They're coming up the Columbia River, right? All these salmon are being hurled headlong up the river by instinct. And one salmon gets up and says, "Stop, stop! This is madness! Wait a minute, do you realize they're going to catch you up there? There's nothing but death and destruction up there. You're going to go up there and you're going to die. Stop, hold it." Hey, come on, forget it. You think that he's going to... No, what happens is the whole school of fish swims by him, and what does he do? He turns around and says, wait, hold on a minute, you guys, and he swims right after him. So the urge to compete is indigenous to us. There's no way to get out and from around it. I think it's a basic instinct, and it has nothing to do with being able to think your way out of it, any more than you can you can philosophize your way out of the sexual instinct, the procreation instinct. You can philosophize all you want, but it's there. So philosophy does not change a damn thing, nor does willpower. It winds up that's what you are. See, so the games just spring like flowers in the spring. This is the time when it really happens. Like one of the great battles I once witnessed in school was on cleanup week. Now, you have cleanup week in your school? You know, cleanup week in the spring, cleanup week. And cleanup week consisted, at this point in the Morton school, everybody was taken out. One day, it was a nice, beautiful spring day just like this. Always we had cleanup week, usually in the end of April, beginning of May. And all the kids go out of school, and the teachers are in charge. And we're supposed to walk around and clean up the whole school grounds. We walk around, we pick up tin cans and we pick up all kinds of stuff that's laying around in the weeds, and they pick up the weeds even, and they clean up. That's cleanup, right? Well, one time the 7th grade was supposed to battle against the 8th grade to see who could clean up the most. Well, I don't have to tell you what happened. Guys were rolling around in the weeds, fist fighting over a sardine can. So I'm standing. This was also at the time when they celebrated Arbor Day. When does Arbor Day come? Well, there's such a thing as Arbor Day. When you plant a tree, you go out there and you plant this tree, and everybody stands around and somebody sings Joyce Kilmer's "Trees." It's all part of the competitive urge that is in spring. Spring is the cruelest time. Yes, indeed. Yes. First of all, it's the procreative time. And a lot of guys are left behind in the procreative rush. They call this the sexual dominance, which is part of the animal kingdom. Sure, if you ever see a crowd of buffalo, there's always one or two buffaloes that run the show. Oh, and those other male buffaloes that try to make the scene. Wow. Oh, wow. And there's a lot of yelling. Well, one time we had this great game that suddenly popped up. I cannot explain to you because the rules were extremely complicated. As you start a game, this is what makes man more interesting than dogs, is that his rules very quickly become highly convoluted, whereas a dog's rules are never convoluted. If two dogs are running after a ball, the only thing they can think of is to grab the ball and run back. It would never occur to one dog to say to the other, "Okay, now wait a minute, let's stop here a minute. Now wait a minute. If you go outside of that line there where that fire plug is, and if you go to the other side over there, it's all over. I get the ball, right? That's called out of bounds. Or if I do it, then you get it, right? It's out of bounds." No way. Throw the ball, and they go after the ball. And they come running back with their eyeballs bugging. So we are the only creature that complicates everything he does with regulations, rules, fashions, all kinds of subtleties. If a person were to come from Mars, he would be totally confused as to what the hell tennis is about. It's all highly complicated, all kinds of little subtle rules. And so you see this even among kids. And I remember a specific game. Do you remember a game that you played when you were in school that was an unofficial game? See, games come often out of the terrain that's available. In other words, tennis, in a very real sense, is a game of affluence. Jim says no. Well, Jim hasn't thought about it then. It is a game of affluence because, for one thing, you need a court. Okay. Not only do you need a court, but that court has to be tended beautifully. You can't just say, well, let's go out and play tennis out on the street. It's never done. Sure, you kids will go out and bat a ball back and forth, but tennis requires a court. More than that, it requires an enclosed court, or you'd be spending all of your time chasing balls. So right there, it requires a certain, there's nothing more valuable in a crowded world than space. And I'm talking about private space. So the idea of having a piece of ground as large as a tennis court just for playing a game on is pretty affluent. And only in countries where there was great affluence did tennis grow. Among them, the 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century England. Tennis was a game played by the landed gentry because they had one thing, land. That's why they called them the landed gentry. They could build this elegant tennis court, and they could get a servant to come and tend the tennis court. Now Jim just says, well, it used to be affluent. It is affluent. I'm talking about as a nation. We're the only country in the world, or one of the few countries in the world, that have still affluence in land, actual land area. And we can afford to set aside those nice chunks of beautifully landscaped ground just for hitting the ball back and forth on. In some parts of the world, land is so valuable because there's so many people that the idea of a giant, 20 in one town would be unthinkable. In places like Japan, where ground is measured by the quarter inch. So that's another kind of affluence. I have often wondered about games, how they do it. Let's take another game that requires great areas, golf. Have you noticed that almost all the games that require great areas of land to play them on are games which originally were considered games of the, let's say, the moneyed. Golf is an example. And and that's one of the reasons why it developed in places like Scotland, because let's face it, this is the country, Scotland and England, this is the country where a lord could have maybe 20 million acres. He owns the whole county. So there's no problem at all of taking, let's say, half your county and making it into a place where you hit little balls in the holes. So golf is part of that kind of growth of affluence. Now, I think that sports often directly reflect the actual environment. I'm talking about the ground and everything else that the country lives in. It's no coincidence that the great hockey players have been Canadian. They have more ice. I mean, it's just a fact. Not many hockey players come from Fort Lauderdale. Just no way. It reflects the fact that they have a winter that's about 10 months long, so you can go out and you skate from the time you're a little kid. That's all you do. Have you ever noticed the dominance of Russians, we'll say, in figure skating? Same thing. They have long winters, and winter things like skating are indigenous to the long winter. On the other hand, we produce the great golfers. Well, because we have great tropical areas where a guy can play golf. He can play golf, 10, 11, 12, 15 months of the year. No problem. It's not easy to find a good golf course in January around Leningrad. Just no way. But so climate does affect, what you do. And I remember a specific game. I can't remember the rules. It just grew. All right? What was the game? Well, we had a lot of sand in the part of the country where I grew up, which was northern Indiana. It's this very sandy country. By the way, it was not country town either. It was very, very urban, but sandy. All right, so the school ground and the vacant lots were sandy. Made a difference. Sand. Now, if our vacant lots were concrete, we couldn't have played this game. It was sand. So what was the game? Well, it was a game designed to be played in a small lot. And now New York, of course, is where they played stickball. Well, because New York is a city of streets, narrow streets. Stickball is to be played on streets. Do you agree? And of course, the rules of stickball always involved if it bounces off that Pontiac down there, you're out. And if it if you hit it past the second manhole cover, that's a home run. And it was all based on the city. Well, our games were based on vacant lots, not big vast areas like, say, country area, but vacant lots, but sandy vacant lots. So this game suddenly grew. And it became a mania with us. We played this game for about 4 months, and then was never heard of again. Now, what was the game? Okay, here's what the game was. It's a curious game. It involved a broomstick. Now, many kid games do involve broomsticks. I suspect that the broomstick has played a greater role in the development of American sport than any other single physical object. Would you agree or not agree with that? In other words, well, you know that one of the great hitters in the National League claims that he grew up hitting pop bottle tops, bottle caps, with a broomstick. He did this for days on end, and he and his buddies would play a game involving pop bottle caps with a broomstick, and he did nothing but hit bottle caps till he was 15. He said he never hit a baseball till he was 15, only bottle caps. Well, of course, if you're hitting a bottle cap with a broomstick, that takes some hitting. First of all, a bottle cap is very, very, when it's thrown, is very, well, let's put it this way, unstable. You can put some fantastic sliders on a pop bottle cap. I mean, you throw a bottle cap and you can get a screwball that doesn't stop. And especially if you're hitting at it with a broomstick, which is no wider than the bottle cap. So to hit one of those babies, and he says he got very good at that. Now that's a guy named Ralph Garr, who was an outfielder and a 300 hitter plus for the Atlanta Braves. Now, what other games came from the broomstick? Well, stickball was a broomstick game, right? You didn't use a bat playing it. It was a stickball. I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are getting uncomfortable with golf is that golf is a game where the only competitor is yourself. I mean, you fight yourself in that game. I'll tell you. And there's no way to get back at your opponent. Say, yeah, you're out there and he belts this shot 290 yards down, right down the middle of the fairway, and you step up there and you belt your shot 110 yards down the fairway off to the left in the weeds. And you can't say, all right, I'll get you on the next shot. No way. Because by the next shot, he's already 3 holes ahead of you. And you're deep in the dandelions. But so tennis, is a game for people who want to belt the other guy. Yeah, that's right. And it's also a game that, it's a game that doesn't involve a lot of I suppose you might say, real preparation. No, it doesn't really. That's why everybody can play tennis. I mean, he thinks not. Well, they're all doing it, friend. And I could suggest to you that tennis, and I'm not saying tennis isn't a hard game. Is that what you thought I said? No, I said that the tennis is a game that even 90-year-old people can play, which means then that it's not a game that takes a great deal out of you. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to find a good 90-year-old shortstop. Especially in the hardball, when that guy's, when you get that hard bouncing ground ball coming down at you, because there's an element. I think one of the things too that people like about tennis is that there's really not much of an element of personal danger in it. Personal danger separates a lot of sheep from a lot of goats, and personal danger is ever present when you're standing at third. And especially when you're digging into the batter's box and there's a left-hander pitching, there's always that element. But then I didn't really get around to our great game. I'll tell you, the game was played with holes in the ground. Yeah, we dug 4 holes in the ground, and one hole was in a sense home base. Now there was no running involved. Don't think a stick ball. A stick was placed, a piece of a broomstick cut maybe 4 or 5 inches long was placed across a slit hole, and then you flipped this thing up in the air with the broomstick, and as you flipped it up in the air, you flipped it towards one of the 4 holes, which were maybe 25, 30 feet away. And if a guy caught your broomstick, you were out. He caught you, and then he was up to bat. And and the runs were scored by the number of sticks that you flipped right into the hole. It's a complicated game because it took a really good eye. And then we had one hole that was way out. That was way out past all the others. It was a bigger hole. It would be the equivalent of a home run. And if you flipped it out there, which had to go over all the outfielders and into that hole, that was like the grand slam and you won the game, no matter how many runs you were behind. Doesn't sound like a bad game, does it? Well, I'll tell you though, you get a broomstick in the teeth and you begin to reassess the game. I mean, and I have had that happen.
By recording from New York, you've been listening to Inside Gene Shepherd. Do join us Tuesday evening at 6:30 for our next Shepherd program. Right now, it's 7 minutes after 7 o'clock. Our temperature is 75 degrees. In tonight's news...